Welcome back, guys. It is craft time. Let's go ahead and get started. In today's video, we are going to be making some fall and Halloween crafts from the Dollar Tree today. So I went and picked up a bunch of their different options and we are going to turn them into some pretty cute creations. I started out with this little pumpkin stack that they had, and I'm going to start by taking it apart. Now it had this spacer in it and they did a really good job at attaching it. So I had to pry it a little bit and then get it apart and pull out the staple. And then I pulled off that paper that they already had on it, hit it with my sander just to make sure that I got any of the rough patches off of it. I removed the sticker from the back and now we are ready to change it up. I'm going to start with the small pumpkin. I actually like the color of it, but I wanted to get rid of the wording that was on there. So I'm going to do a couple coats of chalk paint. Now, I couldn't decide on what color I wanted to go for, so you'll see me use several different types of like greenish blues here. Don't worry about me. I'm just indecisive sometimes, but I am going to make sure I paint the front, the sides, and the back of this pumpkin. While that first coat dries, I'm going to hop back over to the big pumpkin and I'm going to give it a good coat of just plain white chalk paint. We're going to be doing a Mod Podge on this, but I do find that the images on the tissue paper or rice paper or decoupage paper, whatever you're using here, pop off a little bit better if you have a layer of white underneath. It just keeps the colors a little more true instead of taking on that brownish background. So while that's drying, I'm going to hop over here again. You see me changing up the color because I'm unsure, and I'm going to do my next layer of paint for this. And as that is drying, I went ahead and did another coat and started to shade and highlight on this. Now I'm just going to use a couple different colors of like greenish blues and white to shade this pumpkin. So I'm using the darker colors on the outside edges and in the middle where there would naturally be a crease in the pumpkin. And then I'm using the white on the inner parts, like in between those, to kind of make a highlight to look like that pumpkin is rounded out. If you think of a normal pumpkin shape, that should make sense to you, I'm hoping. And then to make sure those lines aren't too harsh, I'm just using my base color and blending them back out a little bit. I'm just going to keep doing this until I'm happy. Remember, if you put a little bit too much on, you can always paint over it, but I like to add a little at a time. That way I'm in more control of it. And again, you just keep doing that until you're happy. I wanted it to kind of have a lot of definition, look a little more realistic with this painting, and we're going to set that aside to dry. And while it dries, we're going to go back over to the big pumpkin, which is now fully dry, which I also did the front and back of this as well. And we're going to go in with some Mod Podge and do a nice even layer all over the face of this. I had already kind of laid out my paper on top and did a dry run to see how I want it to fit and what I like. So now I know exactly how to place it down on my pumpkin. I know that this is a bit like florally, maybe more summer than fall, but I wanted this to be elegant. And I also like love the colors in this, the pop of colors and the changing of the leaves on there. I feel like kind of brings it back to fall a little bit. So I'm happy with it. I'm just gonna go ahead, push it down on there, and then use my Mod Podge and do a top layer to make sure it's sealed down good and well, making sure that I am getting all of those sides to make sure that whenever we go and sand off all of our edges, that it's going to be adhered really well. I'm just using my sanding block to sand those edges nice and slowly. Since there is a stem there, I had to be a little bit careful not to rip the paper, but you can help yourself by cutting little slits in the paper to make it kind of move the way that you want it to. So of course you had to make sure that this was completely dry before starting this process, but you'll get those nice clean edges if you let it dry. And then just use your sandpaper in a downward motion to clean up all of those edges. I think it's really cute and really pretty, and I'm very happy with it. Here you see me going in and just hitting all of those edges again with that Mod Podge. This is just ensuring that they're not going to peel or come up at any point in the future. And it's, I don't know, maybe not necessary, but I always like to do it. I also picked up some of these little like yarn strings or lace, jute lace maybe, from Dollar Tree, and I'm going to use it to wrap the stems on both pumpkins. I like that it has a cute little design, and so I'm just going to wrap it around once, put a little bit of glue, wrap it around again, put a little glue. I'm always putting the glue on the back in case it shows through, that way you can't see it from the front. And then I'm going to wrap it all the way to the top, and when I get to the top, I am going to cut it down to the size I need, run glue across that top portion, and cover it. That way you don't see any of that original stem. I did the same thing for the smaller pumpkin, and all we're going to do here is adhere them back together. So I'm going to kind of play with the placement. I'm not putting that spacer back in. I don't think that it's needed. So I'm just going to hot glue these two together where I see is, the best kind of lineup for me. And then I'm going to use 2 of the Dollar Tree wooden blocks to put them on here to help these stand on their own. So I'm just going to stand them flat on my desk, and then put a little bit of hot glue on that block and push it up to the backing, making sure it's flush with my desk so that it can stand on its own. You can stop here. I think it's very cute as is. You could add lettering, you could add, transfer or something, but I'm just going to add a little jute bow. Let me know what you think about this in the comments. Next, we're going to pick up some of these wooden pumpkins. Now, as I'm painting them, I am continuously telling myself, man, I should have sanded these. Why I didn't stop and just sand them is a great question. Guess I was feeling extra lazy, but I'm going to go in with some black chalk paint on all 4 of these pieces, front, back, and sides, and give them a good coat. I only had to do 1 coat on this because that black covers really, really well, but I just made sure I got in all of those divots there. It wasn't the easiest thing to do, and I really suggest hitting it with a sanding block. Not anything crazy, but just to knock down some of those edges because these were pretty rough. I picked out 4 of them because we're going to be making them say fall, so we're going to do FALL. So obviously I would need 4 for each letter. Once that's dry, we're going to do the crackle effect. I am using Mod Podge. You can use Elmer's glue. There are also many other ways to do this, but this is how I'm doing it. And I'm just using a little sponge, like paintbrush, to put this on. I'm just dipping it into the Mod Podge and then lightly rubbing it across the surface where I want the crackle to be. And I'm doing an even coat and then coming back in and getting a little bit heavier in certain areas. That way I'll have a larger crackle. Now, before this has dried, we're going to go in with some paint. You can use chalk paint, you can use acrylic paint, it doesn't really matter. You just want to make sure you have an excess amount of paint. The more paint you don't want to glob it, but you want a good amount of paint to where you can really lightly slide that on top of the glue, trying not to go over it more than once. You'll see that it looks like I am, but I am barely touching it on the second time that I'm coming through. And I am just very, very lightly, just using the tip of the bristles and mostly just the paint on the bristles, spreading this paint out. So I'm just really lightly doing it. You don't want to drag the glue with you. You just want the paint to sit on top. I'm going to do that over and over. Like I said, trying not to go over the same spot too many times. And then I'm going to use my heat gun to dry them. The heat gun is going to kind of speed up the whole process. So this is sped up a lot, but I wanted you to see the whole process from where I started versus when I put the heat gun on and they started to dry completely. You get those nice, big, beautiful crackle effects, and the thicker you put your glue on, the deeper those crackles will be. Now, I would say don't do it too thick or else it might have some issues drying. Once I'm happy with that and they're dry, I'm going to go in with my Krylon 24K gold leafing pen, and I am going to color the edges of this. I originally just did that bottom lip and didn't love it, so I went ahead and did the entire thing. So I did the entire sides that are black and kind of on the face of the surface, and then I also ran it along where the black and the white meet to kind of crisp up those edges just a little bit. I just felt like they were a little harsh and needed a bit of elegance. From there, I went on my computer and I, took my measurements beforehand, sized out some letters in a font that I like. From there, to be able to transfer these on, I'm going to be using some carbon paper, putting the dark side down, and just tracing it with a pencil. This is going to give the outline of the letters that I need so that I can just paint or use a paint pen to put these letters onto these blocks. This is an easy way to do it if you don't have a Cricut, or if you're like me and your Cricut space won't open. I don't know what's going on with it, but that's okay. We have a backup way. I'm just going to use that same gold pen and I am going to trace out those letters. And then I'm going to use a black paint pen and trace those letters. That way they're not kind of lost in the background. It'll just pop them back off of the pumpkins so that you can actually see the lettering. I'm really happy with how they turned out for the most part. I didn't quite have a plan going into this, so I'm kind of winging it, but I'm happy for the most part. I'm deciding to add a little bit of dots and dashes just for a little something extra, and then I'm going to put these together. I'm just going to be using some popsicle sticks, so I'm going to set it down onto my table to make sure that the bottoms line up because I want those letters to line up. And then I'm going to hot glue this stick where the two pumpkins touch. That way you can't see the popsicle stick from the front. And then once it's all said and done, I will paint those popsicles black to make them match. So I'm going to glue the first two together, glue the last two together, make sure that those are lined up really well. That way when I go to put the full thing together, I know that everything is going to align and look really good. So I did the first two. Now I left room for that third popsicle stick in the middle so that I knew it would fit, and then I just glued that down as well. And then I stood it up while it's drying each time to make sure that all of the bottoms are level against the desk. Now, I went ahead and stapled these in place to give it a little bit more security, to make sure that they weren't going to be wobbling around and that they weren't just going to fall off from the weight of the pumpkins themselves. And then I flipped it over. You guys, so frustrated. Instead of, reversing them, I had just flipped them over and stapled them together. And I did all of it without checking in to see if it was correct. So after being frustrated, I pulled it all apart and I reset it. You can see me now doing it the correct way. I'm flipping those pumpkins the way that they need, and I redid it. So I re-glued everything, I re-stapled it. I didn't show you, but I ended up painting it all black. And at this point, I was pretty frustrated. So I just ended up adding a ribbon hanger that was gold that matched, but I would say add some embellishments. I probably will go back and do that, maybe a cute bow, possibly even some florals, just to give it a little bit something extra because it is a little plain, but overall I'm pretty happy. Would love to know what you guys think about it in the comments below. Last but not least, we're going to pick up just the plain wooden pumpkin hanger and we are going to start painting it orange. I'm just using some orange chalk paint in the color pumpkin because how more fitting could it be? I'm going to do the front, the edges, and the back. If you haven't learned by now, I like to make sure that it looks good from all angles, and I'm going to let that dry. While it's drying, we're going to grab one of the wooden rounds and start painting that white. I'm just using some white chalk paint, and this is going to be a moon. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to paint the front, the edges, and the back of this, and I am going to just do one good coat overall. And then I'm going to come back in with some gray paint, and I'm just going to start making some random swirls. Now, if you haven't picked up, this is going to be kind of like craters, and I am just doing it very randomly. We're going to be Mod Podging over this with some white tissue paper, which will go clear and you can see through it. So it needs to look nice, but not perfected. I'm just going to go back in while it's still wet with some white paint and start blending out these circles a little bit. I'm going to continue doing this until I'm happy with it. So I'm just going to keep taking that white and blending it down so that they're not so dark, and then kind of like smoothing everything out so it's not so blotchy, and it does look good, but again, we're not working for perfection here because it will be kind of covered up. I just want it to have some good dimension and yeah, just look like a moon. Once that's done and dried, we are going to go ahead and do the Mod Podge. I'm just taking a plain piece of white tissue paper and I'm going to cut it down to where it's still larger than this, the moon, but a little bit smaller so it's easier to work with. I'm going to crumble it all up because I want it to be crinkly with lots of texture. I'm going to smooth it back out, and then we are going to Mod Podge this on, just the same as before, only this time, instead of plain Mod Podge, I'm using Dishwasher Safe, just to give it a little bit of a waterproof sealant, so that if somebody does put this on an uncovered porch, it'll last a little bit longer. I'm just doing one good even layer over the entire thing, putting on my plastic glove and pushing this down all around. Not really working out any of the wrinkles, just making sure it's adhered fully. And then I'm going to go back with a good even layer over the entire top of it, including doing all of those sides really well. Once that's done, I'm going to set it aside to dry, but I do hit it with my heat gun off camera just to help speed up the process a little bit. We're going to jump back over to the pumpkin, and this is a trust the process. You're going to watch me go in and kind of shape my pumpkin. I'm going to do that same shadowing and highlighting as I did in the very first project, but I'm going in and it's going to look pretty harsh. So I'm going to go in with some of this red, and I'm going to just start hitting all of those where it would be the increases or indents in the pumpkin. And I'm just going to start shaping it, outlining it, kind of getting an idea of what I want this to look like. Once I have that to where I am happy, I'm going to go in with some white and I'm going to hit it with the highlights. And this is going to give it that more 3D look to where it looks like those parts of the pumpkins are like the humps on the pumpkin and kind of coming out towards me. I'm going to come back in, and I thought this would be still a little bit more wet when I came back in with my top orange, but it wasn't. It was a little more dry, but it still works out because the paint is going to kind of reactivate. And I'm just going to go in with my base color and I'm going to start painting a layer on top. And you're going to see as I'm painting this, it's going to reactivate those colors a little bit, and they're going to start kind of smearing through and just blending out with me. And I'm going to do that all over the top. And then as I go and where I need more paint, more highlight, more shadows, all of that, I'm going to add that back in while this top layer is now fully wet. This is just really going to allow you to blend the colors together and control how dark or how light anything turns out. I just want you to be patient. I'm going to show you this whole kind of process because I want you to see how I do it, because I know some people aren't as comfortable with painting like I might be. So now you see me switching back over to the red. I'm going to hit all of those areas again where I kind of already have an idea where to go because I've done it before. So I'm going to come down on the bottom, hit all of these indents, all of the bottom parts of it, and add this back in. And once I'm good, I'm going to grab my paintbrush with the orange on it, just with what's already on there, and start blending. I'm going to keep doing this over and over. I'm pretty happy with the highlights, but I am going to go back in with a little bit of white and add a few more of those as well. Once I've added that white on, again, I'm just going to blend until I am happy. After, we need to paint the stem, so I'm just using some brown acrylic paint to paint it on there. I'm going to paint the entire stem, but also kind of those like points that a stem would naturally have. We're going to set that aside to dry, and while it's drying, we're going to finish up our moon. Now that it's completely dry, we're going to do that same thing with our sanding block, and we are going to sand away the edges. I'm going to do it in a downward motion so it doesn't tear my tissue paper up, and we're just going to do it to get those nice clean edges. And once it's done, it actually looks really good. I'm very happy with this technique. Next, I've decided I wanted to close up the hole where the string was on the pumpkin stem, and I'm just going to do that with some hot glue. You can use wood filler if you have it. If not, I just put a plastic backing on it to keep it flat on the front. Go in from the back, let it dry, peel it off, and it keeps a nice flat surface that I can now paint in. So I'm going to paint that in, and then once I am ready, I'm going to go in with just a little bit of black and do some detail work and some shadowing on the pumpkin stem. From there, I picked up some of the little ghosts that you can find. They usually are made for like garland and things, and I'm going to paint those up white. I had already glued those holes where the strings would go shut so that you won't see them, and I'm just going to paint both of them front, back, and sides with some white chalk paint. From there, I'm going to go in with some gray paint, and we're going to add in some detail and shading on this as well. For this, you kind of want to go with the folds of the fabric. So where you see those kind of scallops, that's where you're going to come up with a slight line. And then I did it on the bottom of the ghost too. And I'm just going to do a light gray on there and then come back in with some white and shade it to where it's not so harsh. And I'm just going to do this until I'm happy. Also doing a little bit of shadowing at the top of his head. I did this with both of the ghosts and I let it dry. Now I want the eyes and the mouth to be solid and not see-through, so I'm going to take some of this sparkly ribbon that I have on hand, and I'm going to cut it down to size and hot glue it down to the back of the ghosts. I'm going to try to do enough hot glue to hold the ribbon, but not enough to where it goes through the holes and you can see it from the front. I'm going to do this with both of them, and I think it looks really cute and definitely brings out their faces and make them pop. From there, it is time to kind of start assembling and getting an idea where everything needs to go. So I always like to do a dry run, laying everything out to see where it should go before I start gluing. From there, I'm going to be using my STARBOND glue. It's basically a super glue, but it does have a spray adhesive to speed it up. So I'm going to get my pumpkin lined up to where I want it to be, and to make sure I do it in the exact spot I want, I'm going to place it upside down and use a pencil to kind of mark where it should go once I pick up that moon to add the glue. Once I've marked that, I'm going to just add in some of the super glue all over where I need it to be. And then I'm going to go in with some hot glue as well, just for some extra adhesion, and I'm going to put that down as well. This is going to allow it to stick instantly, like the super glue does it as well with that spray adhesive, but just give me a little bit of peace of mind that it's going to stay where I want it to. I'm just going to place this down, and I'm going to, oh, sorry, I did spray it with the accelerant, and then I'm going to place it down, and I'm just going to push and hold, and I'm going to use these little clamps to make sure that my sides stay clamped while I am holding it really tight to make sure everything dries where I want it to be. From there, we can go ahead and glue our ghosts. Again, same thing, kind of laid them out where I wanted them to go, added the super glue, added the hot glue, and then put them down in place. Now I will say this little ghost I'm doing here, originally I liked him over to the side, but after I added the ribbon in a bit, I wish I would have brought him into the moon, closer to the pumpkin at that same height, just because I feel like it would have balanced it out a little bit, but I'm happy overall. At this point, again, my Cricut Design Space was not working, but that's okay. There are other ways. I went into Word and I created this little sign. I had measured my pumpkin beforehand to know how big to make my sign. Actually, I'm pretty sure I did this in Canva. Yeah, I created this in Canva. I downloaded it with a transparent background and I put it into Word to print it out to the size that I needed. So I'm just going to do the same trick as earlier. I'm going to line it up. I'm going to measure it to get an idea to make sure it's mostly centered. It doesn't have to be perfect, but I'm just going to use my ruler here and then I'm going to tape it down. After I tape it down, I'm going to be using that carbon paper, and that's going to allow me to transfer the entire thing onto the pumpkin or whatever project you're using. Now so say you get it all done, and before you peel your sign off with your tape, to make sure it's in the exact same spot, flip it up first and make sure it transferred all of your letters before you take it off. That way, if it didn't, you can retrace without having to try to line it back up exactly. At this point, you can paint or paint marker, whatever you need to do to get those letters on there. I'm using a paint marker, and I'm going to transfer them all on and color it in. After that, all that's left is to add a hanger and a bow. So I added on a rope hanger, and then I made a little bow. So I just cut out some different lengths of ribbon of the colors that I wanted, and then I cut them down to size and then cut off a little triangle to give it a little bit extra. Tied a piece of twine around it to hold it together by cinching it in the middle and wrapping it around and tying it. Then I added a little jute bow to the middle. What I'm going to do here is just wrap the jute into loops around the size that I want it to be, tie it in the middle to make sure that it's secure, and then I'm going to do a little bit of hot glue to make sure it can't untie. After that, I'm going to put my scissors in the loops, cut them to where they're straight, and then I'm just going to trim it down to where it fits into my bow and tie it down with those extra long little ties that I made sure to keep there so that I could do it. I tied that to the rope, and this is complete. I love how this turned out and would love to get some feedback from you guys. Leave me some comments below, little ghost, little pumpkins, to let me know that you enjoyed the video this long. Give me a thumbs up if you did enjoy it. Consider subscribing to my channel so that we can craft together. I'm going to take you in for a closer look, and I'll see you next time.